We're getting high tech, high efficiency, greater productivity. I'm so proud of the fact that we're looking at things like mining to the moon. We've also got the highest average wages in Australia, $158,000, which is phenomenally high.
If you could change 3 policy settings, what would you target first to build that confidence within Australia?
The infamous blue-banded bee that exists for whatever reason in my own backyard.
Just 5 years ago, Western Australia was ranked number 1. If we look today, WA is 15th and Queensland is 18th. What's driving investors away from Australia and towards other jurisdictions? Tania Constable, welcome to this special edition of Hearts and Minds.
Great to be with you, David and Alana.
It's good to see you again. I recall us first meeting in a podcast studio last May, a few weeks ahead of the federal election. And you did a presentation at the WA Mining Club at the time, which was very well received. And with that passage of time, 12 months or so on, and the new budget that's being delivered, we're keen to get an update from you in terms of the MCA's position on government policy that affects the mining industry. But perhaps before we look at that, what's your role within the Minerals Council of Australia and what role does that organisation play?
Well, I'm the CEO of the Minerals Council of Australia and I've been in this role for the last 8 years. The Minerals Council of Australia is Australia's national peak body on mining. We look after all of the federal issues, working in partnership with our state chambers, and there's a state chamber in every state. The Minerals Council looks after the Northern Territory and Victoria. We advocate on a wide range of issues, but making sure that the industry is internationally competitive, that we have investment flowing into Australia, and that we have the right policy settings to make sure that Australia is the number 1 jurisdiction around the world. And, that changes. We sometimes sit behind Canada and sit behind a few other countries, state by state. But overall, Australia is a leading jurisdiction on mining.
The MCA often describes mining as being the backbone of the economy within Australia. Can you explain a bit more about that in practical terms?
Well, it certainly is the backbone of the economy. We operate across regional Australia. Mining represents 10% of GDP. We have a workforce of 300,000 direct employees within the industry, 1.25 million people across Australia. So 1 in 10 workers work in our value chain. And if you think about a mining job anywhere in regional Australia, 6 jobs are created from that one job. We've also got the highest average wages in Australia. $158,000 is the average wage in the mining industry, which is phenomenally high.
And my understanding is the mining industry contributes about 30% of all company taxes in Australia. So effectively, the federal budget is structurally linked to the performance of the mining industry. Do you think that is understood widely outside of the industry, that economic impact?
Well, we try and make sure it's well understood. We've had a campaign going on the economic contribution, and right now the latest figures that we have for 23-24 financial year, over $63 billion is the contribution that mining makes on company taxes and royalties, and that's without other payments and contributions at a community level, about $600 million across communities for social issues. So it's a really big contribution that's made, and we talk about the contribution adding to the services that are across Australia. So when we talk about teachers and police and ambulance and fireys, all of the services that you might have, it's got to come from somewhere. So the taxes that we pay personally and the taxes that come from the highest tax paying industry in Australia, the mining industry, we're contributing very much to those services.
And what are some of the lesser known services and I guess impacts that the mining industry has in some of those more rural towns and communities?
Well, I think it's not very well known that if where you have a mining operation, you've got mines around Australia, a few hundred around Australia, you will always have higher wages in those areas. You'll have better services in those areas. You'll have more vibrant communities usually in those areas. So the mining industry is really adding to the fabric of regional Australia. And we're very proud of that. We're proud of the interaction that the mining community has. It's very much part of every community that it's participating in. And, that's something that we really do celebrate. So it makes us a huge difference. The infrastructure, for instance, is also better
Yeah.
better in those areas.
As executive recruiters to the junior exploration industry and the mid-tier miners, Tania, we're very aware of the impact of mining on those rural communities. And one of our clients, for example, is Evolution Mining, and we're doing some work for their coal operation in the midwest of New South Wales. And it's clear through communicating with some of the locals there that they'd be an absolute loss without that gold mining operation in the middle of their community. It's hugely supportive of people outside of the metro areas in Australia. Now, the MCA has recently launched a national campaign, Hands Off Our Fuel.
Catchy.
We're keen to understand what your concerns are regarding the possible winding back of the fuel tax credits, and what you're hoping to achieve by this campaign ahead of the ALP National Conference in Adelaide next week.
Well, the campaign's been going for a little while now, and I think it's resonating right across Australia. It's resonating on free-to-air and certainly through digital channels. That's where we're focusing our attention. But importantly, what this campaign highlights is that the fuel that is used across industries in regional Australia, so not just the mining industry, but the tourism industry, the farmers, the fishers, a whole range of industries that you would see everywhere across regional Australia. None of our industries use the roads. So, in its essence, road taxes are for road users. So regional Australia, where you don't use roads, you shouldn't be paying these taxes. So that's what the campaign is highlighting, and our target is the Australian community, to make sure that the Australian community is aware of the contribution that our industries are making to regional Australia, that we shouldn't be paying taxes, and then please sign petitions accordingly. So that's our message to the community.
Yep.
And have a chat to your members, your local members, and let them know as politicians that this is really important, not just to regional Australia, but to all Australians. Because if we don't have regional Australia, if we don't have the farmers, the fishers, the foresters, the construction industry, the miners, then we don't operate as a country. That's how important we are to this country. So we're hoping to get that message across. We want to make sure that the National ALP Conference doesn't come forward with a motion to put a fuel tax credit into place at the next election. So we're really focused on that ALP conference on the 23rd of July.
If we play the devil's advocate, what would you say, Tania, to people that might believe that the fuel tax credits could, in effect, discourage investment in renewables? Do you see that as a risk of having these fuel tax credits?
Well, the industry is moving as fast as we possibly can. We already have renewable energy on our mine sites. Have been doing fuel switching for quite some time because we need to have clean energy. There is a policy in place, net zero by 2050. The mining industry signed on to that policy a while ago, and we've been making great gains within our industry to achieve that. So as much as we can do around that fuel switching, renewable energy, that's already occurred. The next stage is the electrification of the industry, and that's a lot slower because if we could do it now, it would be done. But the equipment manufacturers that make the big trucks that we use, that use a lot of diesel on mine site, just as an example, they can't get there fast enough because they're very large batteries that are required, and you've got to have the electricity, you've got to have the storage available. Now that technology is not there yet. We're doing some trials already in the Pilbara, and companies are working together on those trials. But we don't anticipate, based on what the equipment manufacturers are saying, that can be scaled up until the mid-2030s. So as fast as we can move away from diesel, because we're such a diesel-prone nation and a diesel-prone industry,
Yeah.
that will occur.
Yeah, some companies are making faster progress than others. Good to see Bellevue Gold, a WA gold miner, becoming the world's first net zero gold miner.
They're a great company, member of ours.
And the Darren Strallo, the MD, and his board received some criticism a couple of years ago about the heaviness of their investment in renewables, but their diesel cost base now is the lowest in the industry. So, good on them, and the sooner we can get to that electrification stage more widely, the better for the industry.
I think everybody would agree with you on that across the industry. And we'll move as fast as we possibly can, but we need to make sure that we don't have more taxes imposed on us until the industry is ready to take that next step. And that's right across Australia. It's not any particular area. It is right across Australia in a range of industries, as I mentioned.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, Tania, the popularity of Australia in terms of an investment centre for the mining industry, and that's very true. However, if we look at the Fraser Institute's annual ratings of, I think, the top 67 jurisdictions around the world, if we look at just 5 years ago, Western Australia was ranked number one. That is, it was the most attractive jurisdiction in the world for domestic and foreign investment. If we look today, WA is 15th and Queensland is 18th in terms of attractiveness for investment. So what's driving investors away from Australia and towards other jurisdictions, do you think?
Well, the Fraser Institute has two different types of rankings. They rank on policy perception,
Yes.
and they also rank on minerals potential, and the two are brought together to form those rankings. The policy index, we are not doing as well as we would like in Australia, and I think having stable regulatory settings are really important, and that's moved around over the last few years within jurisdictions because each of the states in Australia are ranked by themselves. We don't have an overall Australian ranking. As you mentioned, Western Australia, Queensland, they all have separate rankings. So our regulatory settings need to be a little bit more stable. There's been changes on environmental policy. We've seen changes in the Environmental Protection Biodiversity Conservation Act, and that new act has meant that we have a national EPA, we have a new data repository, Environment Information Australia, and those changes need to be bedded down. So the industry needs to see real change occur before they have the confidence to say the environment settings are as good as they should be. On the legal issues, which is also another policy issue within the index, land access is always a big issue. So again, native title changes, heritage changes within states that is causing a little bit of concern, and then the investability overall of that state. So bringing all of those issues together, it has moved the rankings down. I think what we need to see, South Australia is doing very well. So it's now in that top 10, number 4. I think the jurisdictions need to really work hard, not be complacent at all, and really make sure that the industry does have that confidence. So all of those issues need to be addressed at the same time to make sure that miners, wherever they might be around the world, investors around the world, come to Australia, come to each of those states. And they should be competitive and are competitive, but we need a better outcome, as you mentioned.
If you could change 3 policy settings specifically, what would you target first to make that confidence, to build that confidence within Australia?
Well, I think the environment legislation needs to be bedded down, and we need to see the streamlining between states and the Commonwealth occur. We don't need duplication. We need to have one set of environmental settings that can that a company can meet and provide confidence to both the Commonwealth and to the state. So that's the very first thing that needs to occur. We need stability in our taxation, and if we could bring down company tax, that would be a great thing. But having stable settings, and that's what we're asking for. No changes to the fuel tax credit. Capital gains tax and the changes there, we're very disappointed to see that they are going to impact particularly our explorers. So, we want to be carved out as have our small explorers carved out there. And on industrial relations, I think workplace relations, we're again very disappointed. We did call it last year, as you will have noted from my first podcast with you, that workplace relations settings, those industrial relations, make a big difference. And the changes that we're now seeing in the Pilbara, with strike action starting to occur, is not just going to have an impact on a company. It's not just going to have an impact on a small area. But if I look at what's happening right now in Port Hedland, it's going to have an impact on the whole ecosystem of Port Hedland if those strikes get worse. And that's not good for the area. It's not good for Western Australia, and it's certainly not good for the rest of us across Australia that relies so heavily on the mining industry. So it's those 3, Alana, that I would change.
Few interesting points there. Certainly the industrial action is set to create some reputational damage, I think, not just domestically but overseas with customers and the supply chain generally. My view is that the mining industry generally is a good steward of the environment and of heritage protection, but it seems to me at times there are activist groups, and I'm thinking a couple of years ago, you'd be well aware of it, the McPhillamys project in New South Wales, a project of Regis Resources. Now, they'd invested many, many millions of dollars in about 10 years of work into that project, and under a Section 10 ruling, I believe, the federal government knocked that project on the head, at least temporarily. It seems to me that even though companies go through a very strict regime of satisfying environmental and heritage legitimate concerns, the whim of the government sometimes in terms of 11th hour declines of the project going ahead. Do you have a view on that?
Well, I think you've mentioned the one that is a bit iconic at the moment, the infamous blue-banded bee that exists for whatever reason in my own backyard. I think that the whole issue of making sure that we have information that is credible, involves the local group that can speak for country on the issue that you've mentioned, that's really very important. And Sometimes that doesn't occur because that identification can't be made. But that last minute intervention, and some would argue dubious circumstances, and we certainly are quite concerned with what we saw around that McPhillamys project. The activism that can be used as a weapon, it's been weaponised, and we don't just see it in single projects. We're seeing more and more of it, and over time, and it's inappropriately used. It often involves overseas funding, international funding. It involves people that live a long way from the local area, in capital cities that have no idea what's happening on the ground. And I think that should be of a concern to everyone. And I think that it's well recognised at a federal level and at state levels that we don't need to see and shouldn't be seeing that activism occurring. So we call it out every single time, not just in our industry, but oil and gas. It's happening
Yeah.
quite frequently in the oil and gas industry as well.
Yeah. You also referred to the CGT proposed changes, and the feedback I'm getting from our clients in the mining industry, particularly the explorers, is that will be a real kick in the guts for them, because the mums and dads investors that these companies largely depend on, who take a high risk, high reward attitude towards spending their dollars, will be disincentivized from putting their money into these small, uncertain projects. And I think it was, the reason that the government introduced it primarily was to try and address the housing affordability crisis. But it seems to me that the mining industry has inadvertently become a casualty of that policy. What do you think on that issue?
Well, looking at why it was introduced, I think is, again, well known that Australia has a structural deficit problem. And more revenue needs to be raised in Australia. We would argue that you need to grow the pie. You don't tax industries out of existence. You don't disincentivise the mums and dads from investing in Australia, because capital is pretty footloose. It can go anywhere, and you could make an investment overseas and get a good rate of return. We're in a competition for every dollar. So you want to have that occur in Australia. And it takes a lot to get from an exploration activity to get a mine on the ground. And we need hundreds of them if we're going to decarbonise at a global level. And we need many of them in Australia, where we're very good at mining. So you're not going to get that investment into the exploration centre as if you don't have the right sort of incentives. So Canada are going out of their way to look after explorers.
Yeah.
The United States are going right out of their way to look after explorers, but we haven't. So there's less and less opportunity to be investing in a sector that is critical to the lifeblood of the mining industry. We need exploration to get to those mines.
In terms of the industry, the mining industry's relationship with traditional custodians, how has it evolved over recent years?
I think the mining industry has always had a really good partnership with traditional owners. It has got better over time. It's certainly where you have a mining industry, you will usually have traditional owners as part of that community. We have about 89% of the landmass of Australia under native title. So there's a lot of traditional owners across Australia. So the mining industry need to consult with those traditional owners about plans that they might have. They need to seek agreement. It's quite an abbreviated version if it's at the exploration stage, because not much impact is occurring on those lands. But once you get into the mine, developing a mine, you need to, as a company, make sure that agreements are in place. So they have a right to negotiate under native title. And the mining industry does do that, I think, quite well. There's always room for improvement. And we would argue that their agents, and they're usually either land councils or prescribed body corporates, are very under-resourced across Australia. Some are doing very well, but there are a lot of them and they need to be better resourced. So, in our view, that's where governments have a real role to make sure that prescribed body corporates, land councils, are well resourced. They have the right sort of training, they have right access to people to be able to negotiate properly with mining, the mining industry, with mining companies. Not all of them are really large companies either. We have smaller companies or mid caps that sometimes don't also have the capacity to be dealing well on land use issues. So that's where the mining industry, working together with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander representatives and with governments, we all have a role to play to work together to get a better outcome. And where we do achieve a good outcome, you will see greater economic development for traditional owners occurring, jobs, compensation, better living standards for the people in those communities.
Yeah. And that not only applies to local Indigenous people, but if I think of, companies that are operating in West Africa, for example, Perseus Mining, Australia's largest and most successful miner in Ghana and the Ivory Coast, they invest very substantial amounts of money in the local communities there. They build hospitals, they build schools, education facilities. So they are the lifeblood of those communities overseas, and that's an ASX, producing company. So I think you're dead right, and certainly my time in the industry, I've seen a strengthening of investment in community relationships, both in Australia and overseas, which is really good to see.
I agree with you, David. I think that is occurring in Australia too and has been over a period of time. I think it's important that where we see that those contributions made within our communities, where a community might be relying heavily on mining, that it's sustainable after those operations cease. So I think that's an important um, of an area where we have seen it evolve over time, that what is left behind afterwards, it's not going to be a shadow of itself. We end up with a vibrant community. There are new industries coming in that can take over from the mining industry, from the company itself.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that contributions are made, but a plan on what comes next is also put into place. And I think that's what we're starting to see with groups like the Mining City Alliance across Australia, with various communities that are looking to not just have one type of industry, but to have a number that I mentioned before, the agriculture industry, the fishers where it's appropriate, construction industry and others, tourism, also cohabitating an area so that you get that vibrancy beyond just one industry.
Earlier this year, Tania, Ernst Young, the consulting group, released a report on the top 10 business risks and opportunities for mining companies in 2026. The top 3 risks were 1, operational complexity. Number 2 was rising costs and productivity pressures. And 3 was capital allocation, a reference to the shift towards future-facing minerals. When you speak with industry leaders across Australia, are there other significant issues that are keeping them up at night in terms of concerns about the future of the mining industry?
Well, I think that those 3 are always the 3 that are raised as being very, very important. I think also I mentioned a number of those policy issues and making sure that that they are addressed as part of the overall legislative regulatory environment. But people, access to people is also, I think, really very important. You don't always have the people on hand. And I think more and more we are in a competition. Mining's always been able to access regional or people for regional jobs. But now if you look at the construction industry, we've got the Olympic Games occurring in Brisbane in 2032. The construction industry is starting to take people from the mining industry. And, people want to live on the coast. They don't necessarily always want to be going to regional areas, even if they're flying in, flying out. So making sure you get access to people, making sure that they are well trained, and that at the end of the day, we get diversity occurring within our companies to make sure you get the best talent coming in. So I think that's a big one.
I think the competition for talent is certainly close to our heart as executive recruiters into the industry. I think a lot of directors of companies make the mistake of thinking that their value proposition to potential employees is all to do with the tangible assets. In other words, the mining operations or the projects or the jurisdictions or the balance sheet. All of those things are important, but in our research and experience, a lot of candidates are looking at the more intangible aspects of a company's proposition. In other words, the quality of the leadership at both the board and the executive level, the culture of the workplace, increasingly, especially amongst younger people, is very important. They need to feel safe and included. The values have to align with their personal values. And obviously, environmental and heritage stewardship that we've previously mentioned. These are all very important, less tangible aspects. So in our search for talent, we need to have done our homework in terms of being able to pitch those aspects of the value proposition to people.
Purpose. People look for purpose now in a company. So they're not willing just to go to any company.
Yes.
It's got to meet their own values along the way. And again, making sure that, as you mentioned, all of those issues are addressed. But I think that's what we are really excited by, that the fact that the industry is really focused on it's not looking at a single demographic, but making sure that there's a wide range or effort put into a wide range of areas to meet the purpose of the company, but to encourage people to come into the industry.
And with the advancement of technologies and AI, of course, we're seeing jobs created that we haven't heard of before. Companies these days are looking for data scientists of varying types. They're looking for robotics engineers. And, it's a different world now. That the mining industry has been transformed just in recent years by all of these advancements.
It's so exciting. I was out in the Pilbara last week. We took a couple of our federal secretaries out to have a look at what it meant to move from pit to port along that value chain. So it was to see some of the advancement that is occurring, the remote operations that have been in place for quite some time, but things are moving forward very quickly. And watching a autonomous truck, a number of them turn around and unload within a mine site, and the precision that comes with that to create efficiency within the mining operations, to look at a conveyor belt where AI can pick out problems, rocks that might be too big or not meet the specifications and might cause a problem, and stop that conveyor belt. That's the sort of advancement that we're starting to see in the industry. So we're getting high tech, high efficiency, greater productivity. It's I'm so proud of the fact that we have that, and we're leading that, and we're looking at things like mining, to the moon. That's the sort of things that get people excited and
Yeah.
the sort of advertisement that makes a difference to young people in particular wanting to come in, the gamers
Yeah.
coming in that can work their magic with drones and
Yeah.
remote
Yeah.
operations.
It is exciting. Tell me, how is the MCA using AI internally to improve its processes?
Well, within my own organisation, we have uh, all of the staff that have either been trained at a basic level or becoming more advanced in how they're using AI. We know that there are simple tasks that you can do to make your life easier. You don't want to be spending your time doing administrative tasks. Outlook can be made much easier. Writing a letter, you can still make it personal, but making sure that you've got the formatting or the style all consistent. You shouldn't be spending any time on that. We use it as a research assistant to go looking for information within our own closed system. We've closed our system, but you can look outside at the open source information, and it just speeds stuff up. When I did the training and moving a Word document and creating a PowerPoint within minutes, I'm pretty awful at PowerPoints. I don't know about you, but I'm very not very good at it. But being, having the ability to do that yourself, it just takes all of the onerous work out, all the tedious issues away, where you can spend time on the things that count. For me, spending time looking after the members, spending time working on the real policy issues, looking for the outcomes is where we want the time spent. So for me, we've leaned right into AI in the organisation, and some people are going to, move and do things that are really innovative, and others are going to make sure that they're using it to ensure that they're getting the most they can out of the job.
And I'd imagine that AI is helping speed up the approvals processes by automating much of the research that's necessary.
Yes, well, we put a project to the federal government only last year to look at the use of AI in the regulatory process. Just in the statute, it takes 16, 17 years to get a mine on the ground. If you take out as much time as you possibly can out of the regulatory timeframe, the statutory timeframe, then what you get is you shorten the time overall. So you want consistency, you want accuracy coming from data. So as data comes in, it can be collected, it can be stored, it can be used not just for one project, but for a number of projects. So that's the first stage. And we were really pleased to see that the government allocated over $100 million to their federal environment department to look at AI overall. But this is a big aspect of it. So the work we did really is complementary to what the government has in mind. So again, it's these sorts of innovations that will make a difference. So if we get those changes occurring, and with this new national EPA, if we can get them focused on technology as a starting point to put in AI into the system, you get that accuracy, consistency right from the beginning, and every project from that point on should benefit from overall.
Yeah. If we go back to the policy settings and we talk about the future now, what would success look like in 10 years if we get this right?
More mines on the ground, better environmental outcomes, more vibrant communities, and Australia being not just the wealthy country we've been, but even more wealthy and contributing at a global level.
And what if we don't get it right? How will it look?
Well, we run the risk of going backwards. I'm an optimist by heart. We're going to keep pushing to make sure that Australians know how important the mining industry is for them. Doesn't matter what you use in everyday life, it will start with mining. You either grow something or you mine it. So everything in this studio comes from mining. The microphones that we're using, there's lots of rare earths in these microphones. Everything that we use in modern day life will have a mineral within it or a number of minerals within it. So we need the mining industry. We have a comparative advantage in Australia. We need to acknowledge that, and all Australians need to understand it and get behind it.
Mhm.
If we can be even as good in people's minds as the agriculture industry, the farmers, if miners sit alongside the farmers in the way that Australians view the industry as important and as loved, then we'll have done our jobs.
That's a good point, isn't
Yeah.
it? I think education and marketing is the key, isn't it, to increasing support for what the mining industry does and what it provides our community.
It certainly is.
And to end on a bit of a positive note, what gives you confidence about our future in the industry?
We have some of the brightest minds in the industry across Australia. We have some of the proudest people in the industry across Australia. We have the innovation that I think is the envy of many other industries. And we're partnering, as I said, with the space industry at a global level. We're doing some amazing things in terms of advanced technology, and we're working with partners and living and working within the communities in which we operate. They're the things that make this industry great. And I'm really proud of the industry, and I'd like to see all Australians proud of the industry.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and we wish MCA all the success on this new adventure with the policy settings.
It's a great pleasure to be with you, Alana and David.
Thank you, Tania.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Hearts and Minds. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a rating or share it with a friend. And don't forget to follow us and connect on social media for updates on all of our upcoming guests. I'm Alana Bray-White, and I look forward to you joining us for our next episode.